The 24-25 NBA season is just around the corner. It's one of the best times of year for us die-hard NBA fans, of course, outside of the NBA playoffs. It's our chance to see how some of these new-look rosters are faring, players on new teams, new rookies who have just entered the league, and of course, with that comes a host of predictions. Who do we think is going to win MVP, Rookie of the Year, who's going to finish atop of each conference, and of course, who's going to win the championship. And I've done this every year since starting the channel a couple of years back, but leading up into the season, usually when we're in the preseason, I put out my conference standing prediction videos where I think each team will fall 1 through 15 in each conference by the end of the season. And so in this video, we're going to start with the Eastern Conference, and I'll follow it up with a video on the West teams as well. Of course, as always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. We are inching closer and closer to that 100K mark. Let's see if we can get there by the end of the year. I would greatly appreciate it. Now, predicting the Eastern Conference teams, I feel like has always been a little bit easier than the West. I struggled to put together where I thought teams in the West were going to fall last year, but in the East, it's a little more predictable, where you have your clear favorites that are in a position to contend, those that are tanking for Cooper Flag, and those that are kind of in the middle in no man's land trying to figure out what they're going to do and the direction they want to take. But be all that as it may, we'll start with the team I have finishing with the #1 seed in the East, and probably to no one's surprise, I have the Boston Celtics. Now, yes, I wouldn't be shocked if they fall to #2 or #3 just simply because of the fact, like a lot of veteran teams that are coming off winning a championship, they understand the long grind of the NBA season and know when to take their foot off the gas a little and when to press harder. And so they might rest some of their guys here and there throughout the season. They might take some games not as seriously, but they're still, at the time of this recording anyway, they're the best team in the league, the most complete team on both ends of the floor, and it's why I have them finishing first in the East. #2, I've got the Knicks. Celtics and the Knicks went 1-2 in the East last season. I think it's very much going to play out similarly here this year. Health is going to be a big factor, of course. Is OG Anunoby going to be able to stay healthy? Mitchell Robinson is going to miss a good portion of the season. What's he going to look like when he finally does come back? Karl-Anthony Towns missed some time last year, a lot of time the year before, but assuming they stay healthy, they have one of the best starting lineups in the NBA. I do think losing Isaiah Hartenstein is going to be a big loss for them, especially with Robinson still being out. My biggest concern with the Knicks, though, is their lack of depth, which I covered in my last video, and if they do run into some injuries, how is that going to affect their overall performance and how that impacts their seeding? But I still think they're going to be one of the best teams in the East, assuming all goes well. Do I think they're going to win the championship? No, but a top team in the East nonetheless. At #3, I've got the Sixers, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Sixers potentially finish second or even first. Like the Knicks, health is going to be the biggest question mark when it comes to Embiid's health now that he's in his 30s, Paul George, who has had his fair share of injuries throughout his career and is now 34 years old. But the Sixers, by adding Paul George to put him alongside Embiid and Maxey, this is going to be a very, very good team between their star power, balance of offense and defense. I think picking up Drummond in free agency was a big win for them, as he's one of the best backup fives in the NBA. Snagging another role player like Caleb Martin in free agency was another win. Another team where I question if they truly have enough to get past Boston, but again, they'll still be a top seed in the Eastern Conference. At #4, this is probably where I have my first controversial prediction, as I have the Cleveland Cavaliers finishing 4th. Yes, ahead of the Milwaukee Bucks, which I'll explain why I'm not as high on the Bucks, despite the fact that they still have 2 superstars. And look, I'm not actually that high on the Cavs either. I still think this is a team that really isn't going anywhere, a good team with a solid young core, but not a championship caliber team, both for now and for the future. But I do think Evan Mobley is going to have a better than expected season, dare I say it, a breakout year. Going into his 4th season, his age 23 season, he has looked great from what we have seen in training camp and in preseason play. I expect a big year from Evan Mobley. Still think signing him to that rookie max extension was a stretch, but a big season from him nonetheless. And I also expect big things from Donovan Mitchell. He's 28 now, veteran in the peak of his prime, and he knows his window to win a championship is starting to narrow further and further. And then unlike some of these other teams at the top of the East, the Cavs actually have a solid bench to give them more to work with from a depth standpoint. So while I don't see them making it out of the East, I do think they'll finish in a position to have home court advantage going into the playoffs. And yes, also ahead of the Bucks, who I have finishing 5th in the East. I'm just not that high on this team going into the season. I get that they have their 2 stars, one being a top 5 player in the NBA and Giannis. They have one of the better scoring point guards in the game in Damian Lillard, but Dame, as good as he still is not the player that he used to be. Not as efficient on offense as he once was, and it was clear that the Bucks losing Holiday and exchanging him for Lillard really crippled them defensively. But look, the biggest thing for me is that the Bucks just look old out there. They did not play like a young, energetic, and fast team. They could not keep up with some of the younger teams around the NBA, and they really didn't do much to address those challenges this offseason. They remain one of the oldest teams in the league, second oldest team in the league, only behind the Clippers. Chris Middleton can no longer stay healthy and is already unlikely to start the season. Brook Lopez is nearing retirement. Bobby Portis is going to be turning 30. Pat Connaughton has forgotten how to play basketball, and all they did over the offseason, their biggest move, was adding Gary Trent Jr. Yeah, I don't have high confidence in the Bucks to really be making any kind of noise in the East this season, although they will still be one of the better teams in the East because of the rest of the teams I'm about to go through. At number 6, I got the Pacers. The Pacers, they're an interesting team to me because it'll be a full season now to see Siakam fit with this team and hopefully a fully healthy Tyrese Halliburton, who just never really looked the same after pulling his ACL. Still was great, but was looking like an MVP candidate prior to that injury. Benedict Mathurin is going to be coming back from being out most of last season as well. They were one of the best offensive teams in NBA history last year. They're going to be fun to watch, but they still need more pieces to really get them over the top, and it's why I have them a little bit lower and actually finishing where they finished last year. Also, the other thing to keep in mind, because I'm sure there are some already asking, well, you haven't included the Magic or the Heat yet. Remember that last year, only 3 games separated seeds 3 through 8, and actually 4 games between seeds 2 through 8. It came down to the very last game of the season where a team like the Magic could have finished as low as 8th had they lost their final game, or as high as 5th had they won. And in my view, it's going to be another tight race between those 4 through 8 seeds yet again. And so at number 7, I have the Orlando Magic. I know some are going to say, how can you have the Magic lower than they were last year when their young core, in theory, should be even better than they were? And they added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to give them some veteran leadership and some outside shooting, which they need. Well, it's because the Magic were 1 loss away from being the 8th seed, and while I do think they have a promising young core, I'm still not really bought into them being better than all the teams I have ahead of them. Yes, some injuries to the Sixers, like last season, or even to the Cavs or the Pacers, that could push them down, which would enable the Magic to rise up in the standings. But when those other teams are healthy, I don't think the Magic are better than them. And it's mainly because of the Magic's lack of shooting. That was their biggest weakness from last season, and they didn't do that much to address it despite all the cap space they had going into the summer. Instead, they just used that money on KCP and re-signing all of their non-shooters to long-term extensions. And then at number 8, this of course is where I have Miami Heat. The Heat, though, you really never know with this team, and you can't count them out because they can somehow make a deep run in the playoffs regardless of where they finish in the standings. But for the Heat, they really need to decide what their direction is, because they're now at a place where I don't think you can really call them a title contender. And they're just finishing in the middle of the pack in the East year after year while holding on to Jimmy Butler while his trade value continues to lower with every passing season. At number 9, and I know I'm going through this a little more quickly now, but at 9, I've got the Hawks, another team that is kind of in no man's land in terms of what they're going to do about their future. Not good enough to truly compete, but also not bad enough to really land a franchise-level player in the draft, although they finished 10th in the East last year and ended up getting the number 1 pick. I like what I've seen from Ricochet so far in the preseason, and I think he'll be a fine player. But with the Hawks losing Murray, adding some young talent, but not enough to really get them out of the play-in territory, in my opinion, it's why I have them finishing 9th. At number 10, this is where I have my Chicago Bulls. Much to Bulls fans' dismay, as I know a lot of us would like to see the Bulls lose as many games as possible to better our chances for a shot at a generational talent. But look, the fact of the matter is, as currently constructed, the Bulls have too much talent to truly be bottoming out in the East. Not when you have teams like the Nets and the Wizards or even the Pistons who are going to be exceptionally bad this year. Zach LaVine is still on this team. He's still trying to get traded, and the Bulls are still wanting to move him, so it's not like they're going to just bench him or Zach himself is going to give minimal effort. They still have Nikola Vucevic. They've got Kobe and Ayo Dosunmu, who are coming off great seasons and continuing to look great in the preseason thus far. Again, they're not going to be good. They're not going to be a good team. We all know that, but they're not going to be as bad as some people might think, and I see them getting that last play-in spot. Finishing 11th in the East, I'm going to go with the Hornets on this one. I do think they'll be better than they were last year, as I think Brandon Miller is going to build on his great rookie season and take another jump. I like their draft selection and Saloon. The only reason I don't have them higher is, well, one, they still don't have a lot of talent, and also I don't trust LaMelo Ball's health. If he can somehow stay healthy for the whole season, then yeah, I can see the Hornets jumping the Bulls, maybe even the Hawks to get into the play-in, but I really don't see them being much better beyond that. but better than last year, given they finished 13th and only won 21 games. Then at number 12, I've got the Raptors, another team that is rebuilding. They have good, talented pieces that they're trying to put around Scottie Barnes. Quickly got paid big time. RJ Barrett looked a lot better in terms of his fit on the team after being traded away from New York, but yeah, still not good enough to really make any headway in the standings. Then at 13, this is where I have the Pistons. Yes, the Pistons will not finish with the worst record in the league this season. They're still not going to be great, but this is the year where I can see them finally starting to make strides in the right direction with their young core of Cade, Duren, Ivy, Asur Thompson. They now added some vets like Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley. I like their draft pickup in Ron Holland, a new coach this year as well. So yeah, I would be shocked if the Pistons weren't at least slightly better than they were last year. The last two spots in the East, honestly, are probably interchangeable in terms of who finishes at the bottom. I guess it'll be more of a matter of who wants it more for that number one pick. But if we're just looking at a straight side-by-side comparison between these two teams, I would say the Nets are slightly better on paper. Now, if they trade Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith to further embrace the tank, then no, the Nets would clearly be the worst team in the East. But as of right now, I think the Nets have the slight edge to finish 14th, and then the Wizards, they're just so bad. Even watching them in preseason, they are a very bad team. Turnovers galore, can't play defense, poorly run offense, inefficient team. Yeah, if I was betting them, I would say the Wizards finish last in the Eastern Conference this season. So there you have it, my predictions for this upcoming year in the Eastern Conference. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.